Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo.
Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Welcome to the JM Report. I'm your host, IAmGoodOlJM. This is episode 66, coming to you from CSP Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling, post July 4th celebration. Hope everyone has and still is enjoying their long 4th of July weekend. I know in some places, matter of fact, in a lot of places, including California, who unfortunately suffered an earthquake, weather is an issue. And my thoughts and prayers are for those in the path of this earthquake. Apparently, it's not over. Last I checked, as of about 12 hours ago, they were expecting more tremors. The earthquake itself was about a 6.4, 6.6 on the Richter scale. Experts are expecting another earthquake as big as a 6.6, even bigger than that, at some point within the next 24 hours. It was originally stated at the next 48 hours from the original impact just yesterday. And man, what a shitty way, I'm sorry to say, but what a shitty way to celebrate the 4th of July with your friends and loved ones. If you're at a barbecue or maybe even near the beach or a lake, for something like this to happen. That I know of, there aren't any fatalities, although there were numerous injuries reported. A hospital had to be evacuated as a precaution, but they opened up just as quickly to receive those injured. And reports are saying that although it lasted about 20 seconds, the earthquake, I'm sure for those who were in it must have felt like a lifetime, but it did a lot of damage, unfortunately. So it's going to be a while before they can make any kind of repairs, since they're expecting another one to hit. Hopefully it doesn't happen, because they said it was a 50-50 chance. And I personally want to lean on the side that it's a 50% chance that it doesn't happen at all. So again, my thoughts and prayers go out to those that were affected by the California earthquake. Everyone else, tornadoes and floods and heavy rain, hail. I think it's safe to say now that Mother Nature is pissed. I think we as humans have been ruining the planet for long enough, and this is her way of paying back. But that's me not even trying to be remotely sarcastic or funny about it, but there have been times in history, the earth has fought back, so to speak. And nature, for those who believe in it, can be very vengeful. And yeah, I am one of those believers. I do believe. But moving on, not to turn this into an episode of National Geographics or Natural Geographics, whatever it's called. They took that channel away from us, bastards. But this week, specifically in WWE, was the dawning of yet another new era that has begun on Raw and Smackdown. Now, at first I wasn't sure exactly when they were going to begin, but apparently it was right away, almost as fast as the announcement was made last week. of Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff being executive directors of Raw and SmackDown, respectively. And their first day on the jobs were this week. Maybe not so much Bischoff, which I'll get into in a little bit, but Paul Heyman's fingerprints were all over Monday Night Raw, and you saw and you felt the difference. It wasn't too obvious. Then again, it wasn't too lackluster. But if you compare the previous week's episode of Raw into this week's, yeah, a total 180. So let's get right into it. It's you want to try to start your first day on the job or your first day back on the job, in a sense, if you're Paul Heyman, and try not to have any screw ups from jump. Well, guess what happens? They had a screw up from jump. Might have lasted a split of a second, but screw up nonetheless. So after the opening intro, well, that's kind of redundant. You got the announcer saying, "Welcome to Monday Night Raw," and blah, blah, blah. They got to get a shot of the audience. Right before we get to our very first match, we caught a quick blink if you miss it glimpse of the NXT Tag Team Champions, the Street Profits, backstage. And what was even funnier, it wasn't a shot of them from, say, the waist up or anything like that. No, it was of their torsos, and clearly showing that they weren't tag team champions from anywhere. They got a shot of the tag team physical titles on screen for another second. I didn't hear or see anywhere that this was not obviously was caught for us, the live audience watching on television, but I don't know if it was caught on the Titantron for the audience in the arena. But either way, it was a screw up nonetheless. Maybe I can maybe say it was a bit of a, well, you pushed the wrong button or you went to the wrong camera kind of thing. But still, Heyman was, to be said, was shoulder to shoulder with Vince McMahon at gorilla position, going over each step of every segment on Raw that night. And again, it showed. And we began with a false count anywhere between Braun Strowman and Bobby Lashley. I guess we're done with the tug of wars and arm wrestling competition between the two. Well, there goes my fantasy booking of these guys having a push-up contest or bench pressing contest. But we have memories. I think the last one of that we had was Ryback and Mark Henry on Smackdown. So these two wrestled everywhere. Of course, they started in the ring but ended up on the outside. They fought ringside. They fought in the arena. Among them, as they say, good old JR. Then they get to the staging area of the entrance of Monday Night Raw. It appeared that Lashley was setting up Strowman for a spear, and Strowman was just getting to his feet near the ramp area. And as Lashley's posing, he has his back against the LED wall there, and we all knew what was coming. Strowman would tackle Lashley through the wall, and we see sparks and pyros and all bunch of nonsense going all over the place. Why the cameraman was as close as he was, and you saw him in a replay from a different angle. He was trying to catch his footing. He was trying not to keep the camera straight and focused as he was wobbling it all over the place. But again, if you see sparks and pyro like that, that's supposed to give the illusion of electricity. Why would you want to be that close? So anyway, eventually power goes out on that side of the arena, and all camera guys, all of their power links and cables to their respective cameras all die. And then we are on this fixed camera, possibly from the mezzanine section of the arena on that side, or maybe they try to play it off as it was a surveillance camera. And they just hold on to this one shot for about 3 minutes or so altogether, but it felt such a long time because you couldn't see what was happening. and you couldn't really hear what was being said, other than Lashley and Strowman were presumably electrocuted and were out for the day. They didn't want to catch, after they went through and they stopped replaying this particular angle, but I could have sworn that there was a hand right underneath the staging, right where the LED wall broke. A hand just popped up out of nowhere and then just as fast disappeared. Now, I don't know if there was anyone underneath the staging area to set off said pyros or whatever, but here's what I would have done. If this guy was there to do special effects, okay, great. Why'd you pop up your hand like the Undertaker coming out of the grave? I have no clue. But if you're trying to give the impression or the illusion that these guys were legit electrocuted, why not have that same person or someone else next to him that does special makeup effects? And the cameras were far away enough, and that area was dimmed enough, especially if these guys that were underneath the staging area were wearing dark clothing or anything to match the dark atmosphere. They could have crawled over to say Lashley and Strowman, okay, here's the spot. Don't move. You've just been electrocuted. And even Lashley gave that impression because by the time they actually did get back to the close-ups, Lashley was a fish out of water, shaking all over the place. And what this other person could have done is maybe just apply a bit maybe of makeup of burnt marks. For those who don't know it, when you get electrocuted, depending how bad it is, you can get burn marks. As if you were holding your hand over the stove a little bit close to the flames, you're going to get burned. Maybe not exactly like that, but burns from electricity, they're darker and can leave almost like an outline where you were meant to be burnt. And that's what they could have done here. Apply the makeup on the arms, maybe on the face. Well, on Strowman's case, it would be difficult to apply anything in his face because of the big-ass beard he has. With Lashley, could have applied it on his back because that was the first thing to get exposed to the sparks, maybe on his head. But that's just me fantasying, not booking, but fantasying, I guess, gimmick. I mean, you're going all, if you're going to go all out, then go all out. And first of all, I'm glad to see Pyro back on the show because it's not like that they can't afford it anymore. Not to mention that $1 billion deal coming in. I mean, who knows how much more Pyros we're going to get moving forward. So they played it off as these two were off the show for the rest of the night. They were taken to the hospital. It took 5 guys. 5 guys, including 2 guys who were just as big as Strowman, to get him on the stretcher and wheel him out to the back of an ambulance, who couldn't fit, by the way. At first, even with the stretcher all the way in, Strowman still had to tuck his feet away because they couldn't close the door. By this point, Lashley was already long gone in an ambulance and would eventually put out a tweet video the next day on Smackdown. Even though in the beginning of the show, they announced that Lashley had already checked himself out, so maybe this video was done before that, but it wasn't explained that way. But Lashley says that the next ride that Strowman takes will be to the morgue. You son of a bitch. So now they're incorporating more adult language here because, the PJ stuff wasn't really working. And I'm pretty sure that had to do with a lot of the conversation and negotiations when it comes to Paul Heyman. Like, hey, if you want me to do this, this is how I got to do it. This is how it has to be. This is how it has to go. Edgy enough, not to the extreme, not pushing the envelope. They're nowhere near pushing any kind of envelope right now. Just little hints, little teases here and there. Moving forward is enough, and it's just fine for now. So, no word on Strowman as far as his kayfabe injuries, but I'm pretty sure we're going to end up seeing him this week on Raw. That's coming up. And yes, Corey Graves was allowed to say holy shit on air. The timing of it, I question. But you notice when he did say that, Renee and the other guy, they weren't saying anything as they sometimes over talk each other, over overlaps each other. And kayfabe again, because that's probably another idea of Heyman to do, is to bring back kayfabe from the grave, is that Corey Graves put out a tweet that he was fined because of his language. And now that he's probably, he didn't say how much, but I found it extremely funny that the next tweet he put out that he's probably thinking of starting up a GoFundMe page. So those two little words must have cost tens of thousands of dollars. And now that Corey Graves' house is probably up for sale right now. So they go to commercial. And kudos for not starting the show off with a promo. And we get back, and this is after we see both guys loaded up into an ambulance. Of course, after all this insanity, the lights come back on, conveniently, in that section of the arena, where we hear the commentators, where they showed at least 4 to 5 different angles of the replay, of the same replay, of the same action, over and over again, and they would do this for the rest of the night. Bit of overkill there. I mean, after it just happened, okay, I get it. You want to show it half a dozen times, and they will eventually have this specific close-up of Lashley's face and expression, and he sold it pretty well. Lashley did. Too bad they couldn't get a expression shot of Strowman going through the wall. But yeah, it was. By the time I got to the second half of the second hour, it was already overkill. I'm sure everybody by then knew what the hell was going on. But we move on as the Viking Raiders took on the New Day of Big E and Xavier Woods. So, unfortunately, at least for now, the wild card rule is still a thing. So these two had a pretty good match until Samoa Joe interfered, yanking Xavier Woods off the apron and slapping on the coquina clutch, causing the referee to call for the bell and a DQ. Out comes Kofi Kingston to make the save and for a payback to Samoa Joe. And surprisingly, the Vikings, they assist Samoa Joe in attacking the New Day on the outside of the ring. So the Vikings are now heels. Because guess what, player? They go to commercial, we come back. 6-man tag team match. The New Day taking on the Viking Raiders and Samoa Joe. That's something else they got to work on. I'll try to explain later. So there's a hot tag to Kofi Kingston. Everyone took turns except Samoa Joe taking suicide dives out of the ring. And in the confusion, from behind came Samoa Joe, who slapped on the coquina clutch on Kofi Kingston. And Kingston passes out as the Raiders and Joe win the match. So this is more than just giving Samoa Joe momentum heading into Extreme Rules for his championship match versus Kofi Kingston. Drake Maverick and his new wife, Renee Michelle, were backstage. Mrs. Maverick was under the impression that they were on their honeymoon. Instead, she gets upset when she realizes she was on Raw, or at Raw. This comes after it was announced over the weekend on social media between EC3 and Drake Maverick that Maverick wasn't planning on going on a honeymoon. Instead, he was going to focus his attention on getting back the 24/7 title. So Drake introduces his wife to Dana Brooke, who was hanging out backstage. And somehow, Mrs. Maverick realized why Drake was there to begin with. His obsession to win back the title of the 24/7, and gave him an ultimatum. It's either his wife or the title. Of course, Drake picks his wife and he hugs her. Only to see standing behind his wife was R-Truth, basically teasing Maverick with the title as Maverick tries to prevent his wife Michelle, or Renee Michelle, from seeing him. But he had this look of disdain on his face. Truth tells Maverick not to mind him because he's into the romance. The Good Brothers and AJ Styles having a conversation backstage about their performance of last week as the brothers lost to the Usos. And according to them, AJ nearly lost to Ricochet. So they have a bet, the brothers do, that they don't believe that AJ can defeat Ricochet for the United States Championship. But if he does, not only does he get the title, Anderson even puts up his hot Asian wife. For those who haven't yet seen Carl Anderson's wife, yeah, he's not lying. No Way Jose makes it to the ring, and part of his entourage is R-Truth. Now, at this point, kind of makes you wonder, because the camera will pan out and show us ringside, sitting at ringside, will be Drake Maverick and his wife, Renee Michelle. So Truth breaks away from the Congo line and heads over to Maverick, kind of teasing him, like, hey, you want to jump over the wall there and have a match right here, right now? And then even enticing him even more, Truth lays on the barricade wall right in front of Drake. He stands up, Drake does, but then looks over at his wife, and she tries to give him the look like, you better not. So he doesn't fall for it at the time. However, the 24/7 roster give chase, and they all run to the back. Meanwhile, No Way Jose versus Cesaro, well, it never took place. Cesaro will jump Jose from behind before the bell rang and knocks him outside. There he delivers the neutralizer, assumingly knocking him out, and the referee calls for the match, a no contest. We are finally introduced to the Street Profits, the NXT Tag Team Champions, although they did not compete on Monday Night Raw. But this was their introduction of sorts to the main roster and to a bigger audience, for those who don't follow or are aware of Street Profits, let alone NXT as a whole. But they want to bring swag back to Monday Night Raw. We see Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre head to the ring to explain the Undertaker situation. And we come back from commercial and we hear that the match later on between The Miz and Elias will be a rematch, 2 out of 3 falls from Smackdown of the previous week. Yay, 2 out of 3 falls. So Shane and Drew finally hit the ring. McIntyre doesn't care about The Undertaker, and Shane is looking forward to putting down Roman Reigns and Extreme Rules. And they call out The Undertaker. Doesn't budge at first. There's no response. So Shane, that's what we thought. All of a sudden, the lights flicker. And then there are CGI lightning bolts hitting the top of the ring post. The lights go out, and here comes The Undertaker. He appears on stage, and while he's doing this, Shane and Drew jump out of the ring. Jump over the wall. They're behind the first section ringside area seats. And The Undertaker clarifies, as Shane pointed out before, that Roman Reigns did not reach out to The Undertaker for help. He's a better man than that. And at Extreme Rules, The Undertaker plans to take both McIntyre and McMahon's souls to hell, where they will suffer an eternity of damnation, and they will never rest in peace. Before her match against Natalya, we find out from Lacey Evans and Baron Corbin that their mixed tag team match for both the Universal and Raw women's titles at Extreme Rules will now be an Extreme Rules match. So that should be very interesting. I suspect a lot of kendo sticks and folding steel chairs are swinging. So Lacey Evans taking on Natalya. A bit of a short match as Baron Corbin ringside provided a distraction by pulling on Natalya's ankle. She turns and is struck by the woman's right, and Evans picks up the win. Ricochet has an interview and is interrupted by the Good Brothers, trying to put it in his head that Styles could have beaten him in 3 minutes last week. Ricochet said that he's ready to defend the title anytime against anyone. However, he's not looking for any trouble with the Good Brothers. Anderson and Gallows implied that he might be in trouble with someone else. Sure enough, the Good Brothers catch up with AJ Styles and twist Ricochet's words around, saying the complete opposite. And this fires up AJ Styles and decides to want to have a chat with Ricochet, who just happens to be right around the corner. Seriously, the cameraman took maybe 3 steps back, pans to the left, and there's Ricochet right down the other hallway. So no one heard any of the trash talking back and forth between the two. So AJ gets in Ricochet's face. Oh, you think you can beat me for the title and this and that? And Ricochet's, no, that's not what I said. And back. So AJ slaps Ricochet in the jaw/neck. Ricochet retaliates. Yeah, that's more like it. And I'll see you in the ring. I challenge you for the U.S. title. And that will be our main event for Monday Night Raw. So we get to the Miz versus Elias 2 out of 3 falls match. Elias gets attacked before the bell rings. He's thrown into the railing. He gets thrown over the ring steps and eventually back into the ring. The referee tries to separate the two. And the Miz immediately hits a skull-crushing finale and wins the first fall when the bell rang, and then the bell rang. It's at this point, conveniently, the announcers mentioned that after the second fall, they will go to commercial. And almost out of nowhere, Elias hits a drift away, pins the Miz, and gets the victory for the second fall. And like promised, they go to commercial. And then they come back to commercial. And of course, the third fall is the longest of the three, having a pretty competitive match until they get to the hard camera side of the ring apron. Elias is charging. Miz ducks out of the way, and Elias knees the ring post. He falls back into the ring. Miz immediately puts on the figure 4, and Elias taps out for the Miz to win the 2 out of 3 falls match. So my thing is, I get it. They don't want to have any wrestling matches or wrestling at all during commercials. Okay. The first 2 falls, and including the introductions, that took, 3 minutes? Maybe 4? They knew that they were going to go to commercial eventually. There was going to be no wrestling, at least not for the audience, not for us, for that other 2 or 3 minutes of commercial time. And to go back, and everyone at the same time gets to watch the wrestling of what's going on in real time. So couldn't they just, do a quick promo? You could have Elias do a little mini concert, which he didn't do. Could have talked down the audience again, who wants to walk with Elias or whatever, and have the Miz interrupt it. It's like, all right, when we come back, we will have the 2 out of 3 falls match. It's time filler. Conveniently placed, I might add. But what are they going to expect when, let's say, they book or plan a 2 out of 3 falls match for a major pay-per-view? They probably won't ever do it again on a pay-per-view because there's not going to be any commercial. Well, I take that back, unless you're going to be a part of the kickoff show. Then they have a commercial during your actual match, which, again, doesn't make any sense. It's bad enough that these guys are being kept off the main card. Now their match during the kickoff show, the pre-show, have commercials in them. Well, it's time filler. I think this little experiment that was doomed to fail from day one is definitely not working. I don't know if this was part of Heyman's call, but I hope he does go away with this. You just put that away. No more 2 out of 3 fall matches, at least not so back-to-back like this. It gets redundant, it gets stale, it gets old like it already has. So Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch are backstage having an interview. They get interrupted by Maria, who she and her husband recently signed an extension on their contracts for about 5 years. Depends who you asked. It could be a $250,000 deal each, maybe a little more. But they're getting paid. And it was here that Maria challenges both Rollins and Lynch to a mixed tag team match along with Mike Kanellis, who surprisingly also appeared, because she is sick and tired of hearing that Seth and Becky are the it couple of WWE, that they are the first couple of WWE. So kudos for finally having Mike and Maria back on Raw after who knows how long. So this was probably Maria's first match after having her first child nearly a year ago. Maybe more than a year ago. So what am I saying? She was pregnant for 9 months. But I'm saying her first match back since announcing that she was pregnant the first time with her child. Took another few more months off, obviously, to get back into shape. And then there will be a bit of a bombshell dropped at the end of this match. So it was Mike Kanellis and Seth Rollins going at it for a little bit. The match wasn't going on Kanellis' favor for too long. Eventually, Rollins forces Kanellis to tag in his wife Maria so Becky Lynch could get some action. So this whole time, off microphone, Maria's just basically chastising her husband. But once she was tagged, that demeanor changed very quickly. Jumping off the apron, not wanting to do anything with Becky Lynch, grabs the microphone and says, no, you can't touch me. I'm pregnant. Again. Back in the ring, because Becky Lynch was the legal person and fuck the rules, Mike Kanellis never tagged out. So Lynch applies the disarmor and Mike Kanellis taps out. As both champions win the match, they leave. Maria's still on the microphone and just ripping apart her husband on live audience, and to the live audience and the TV audience, that he wasn't man enough to knock her up. That maybe next time she'll ask Becky Lynch, the man, to impregnate her instead. And at first, a lot of people thought all of this was a work. Maria just didn't want to wrestle and just made the announcement that she was pregnant again. Well, it's all legit. A bit of an old school way to write someone off television, even though Maria and Mike haven't had at least Monday Night Raw TV time. They had plenty of 205 Live, but it's a way to write off Maria. And she's legit pregnant. She took to social media to show her pregnancy test. It was positive, or in this case, the word pregnant was spelled out on the little monitor there. So Maria, individually, who signed about a 5-year extension with the WWE worth about $250,000, if not a little more, again, depending who you ask, is now has to sit out possibly another year to a year and a half because she's pregnant. And word is, or rumor, is saying that the WWE is very upset about this. You just signed a deal about 2 weeks ago, and now you're telling us that you're pregnant. Well, she can't get fired for that. She definitely can't even get sued for that. I am, though, like many others, I'm sure you are, curious of the timeline here. Was Maria pregnant during the signing of the extensions? Did she get pregnant afterwards? I mean, at this point, it doesn't really matter because she is pregnant. She's going to have a second child. Kudos, Mastertov, congratulations all around, all that jazz for the Kanellis family. From a company standpoint, I've very little understand. That's not to say that I don't completely, but I do, and I give a bit of a pass to be upset if that is the case. I'm not saying that the company shouldn't have, and I'm not saying that it was all part of a plan from Maria and Mike to extend their contracts because they were being offered. WWE didn't want them to go anywhere else, even though they're not really being used other than 205 Live here and there. But what if we can have an extension? Like, okay, Mike, you knock me up now, and hopefully by the time we get to the contract signing, I will be pregnant about a week or so, a week or two pregnant, and I can tell him, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant. I'm not insinuating that. Could that have happened? Well, in any devious mind to get more money out of a company without necessarily suing them or settling or whatever, yeah, it might be a way, but it's a bit of a stretch, is what I'm trying to say. And Maria, and probably this is something else to cross her mind, like, well, I'm not being used as much as I would like to. I mean, she was all over Ring of Honor, and when they debuted a couple of years ago in WWE, Maria was, and Mike, possibly, 2 or 3 weeks after their main roster debut, they all but disappeared. Eventually, they found their voice in 205 Live, and they've been there ever since. But even there, they have 2 or 3 matches in total. The entire show does. Once in a while, you do get to see a Kanellis. More Mike than you did Maria, because Maria wasn't really wrestling. So what now? Maria's going to have a second child. And assuming that Maria looked at it the same way I'm about to mention here, they're not going to use me as much, so how about we go ahead and push up our plans of having a second child now rather than later? If you were married to Maria, would you want to argue? I mean, let's be honest here. And Mike Kanellis, who is probably one of the luckiest SOBs alive today, and is married to her. Sure. And to clear up anything that Mike might have planned out as far as extending his contract, and now that his wife is pregnant, he's going to be off the road. No, he was back to work the very next day at 205 Live. And Maria wasn't, obviously, because now she needs to be home, resting, not putting her body through bumps and going through tables or anything like that. She doesn't need to do that right now. So she'll probably still get a check. My understanding is when you do actually have TV time, you get a little bit more into that said check. But she signed a guaranteed contract. And I'm sure there are, when it comes to women signing a talent contract, that when they come across certain things that they have to address or have to deal with or have to go through that men don't, it's they give them that pass, basically. I mean, can a man get pregnant and ask for time off? Well, if a man's pregnant first, let's deal with that side of the argument before we talk about giving him time off to begin with, because this is not Junior. But no, the WWE they wouldn't have any right. If they're upset, okay, fine, that won't last, but the rest of that day. But to take any kind of actions will be completely wrong. And yeah, they'll be sued for a lot more than whatever their contract is worth for both Kanellis, either individually or combined. So trending on very, very thin ice there. Or at least it would be. Paul Heyman was backstage being interviewed, once again reminding us that Lesnar is the beast in the bank, or whatever the hell he's called nowadays. He may or may not be there. He may cash in at any time. Yes, we know. He gets interrupted by the Street Profits. And they just do their thing, making fun of Heyman's name before eventually walking away, claiming to be a busy man, which, let's face it, he really is nowadays. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross head to the stage for another episode of A Moment with Bliss. And the theme of tonight's show was her thoughts and prayers go out to Strowman and Lashley. Of course they do. Alexa's special guest is Nikki Cross herself, saying Alexa feeling the love after Cross defeated Bayley last week for Alexa to win a rematch against Bayley for the Smackdown Women's title for Extreme Rules. This brings out Carmella, and I think this is going to be like a domino effect, that every week someone's going to confront. They have been doing this, but more so obviously leading up to Extreme Rules specifically. And if not there, when exactly are Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss going to break apart? So Carmella's here asking Nikki why isn't it her going against Bayley after she beat her on SmackDown, and she's not getting the title shot. So, of course, Alexa takes exception to this. If you want to do something about it, then Carmella took that as a challenge. So let's go to the ring. Let's bring a referee. So we have a match, Carmella versus Alexa Bliss. So we have a challenge match here. The bell rings. Alexa charges. Carmella ducks out of the way, rolls behind and underneath Alexa Bliss to get the pin. So in less than 5 seconds, the match was over. We immediately go to commercial and we come back. Now it's Carmella going one-on-one with Nikki Cross. So it was predictable, and we actually have a competitive match here. But Nikki Cross was victorious over Carmella after a swinging neckbreaker for the win. These gosh darn commercials, man. Again, and even they were so close this time around. And they had the excuse of using a talk show where, okay, Alexa, Carmella, whomever it was that challenged the other, all right, I'll see you in the ring. And right there and there, they could have gone a commercial to come back. And yes, if it was booked for Alexa and Carmella to have a 5-second match, you can still have that 5-second match. We can actually see not Carmella, but Alexa argue with Nikki Bella, like get in there, avenge my loss or whatever because you're my best friend kind of thing, and then start that match. Or have that argument, go in there, avenge me, go to commercial, and then when we come back, okay, now we have the Carmella Nikki Cross match. I mean, when it looks and feels rushed, it's exactly that. And we don't have enough time, the fans do, especially the ones watching at home. Like, wait, what just happened? So now what? What's next? So we got to wait 2-3 minutes to find out what their next move is. And usually it doesn't make sense, but what do I know? Drake Maverick and his wife, Renee Michelle, are leaving the arena as Renee steps away to freshen up, as she put it. Before leaving, the 24/7 roster runs by Maverick, nearly running him over. So as they go off screen, R-Truth makes his appearance, hiding behind some equipment there, behind the pillar, matter of fact. He goes face to face with Maverick, saying he doesn't have a referee. So Truth turns around and wishes Maverick good luck. And he attacks Truth from behind with his suitcase, calls out for a referee, covers Truth, and becomes the new 24/7 champion right there and there. Renee returns. Maverick tells her that he knew that the honeymoon was going to be great, but now that they get to do it 24/7. So this implies that we're going to see a lot more of Renee Michelle. If not on Smackdown or Raw every week, but at some point she's going to get her honeymoon. So in 2 weeks in a row, the main event was Ricochet versus AJ Styles. Only this time it is for the United States Championship. And I just happened to look at my clock at this time, and it was about 11:15. And 2 minutes later, the bell rings, and the announcer mentions that AJ Styles is the winner and the new United States champion after delivering a phenomenal forearm. But here's the thing. During the pin, Ricochet, trying to reach with his leg the bottom rope, instead landed underneath and outside of the ropes. The referee does not see this. AJ doesn't see this. The announcers do. And this brings out a second referee to explain what happened. We go to commercial. And we come back. The match continues. Ricochet is still the United States champion during this match. The Good Brothers are ringside now. Even though AJ tried to convince him to leave the ring area, but they refused. So the match continues. In the end, Ricochet jumps off the second rope, does this. It was so crazy and difficult to explain. But basically, he was trying to go for a victory roll in midair. That didn't work, so he jumps back to his feet, twists and turns around as if he was delivering a power slam, but it was more of a pin combination, and defeats AJ Styles. So Ricochet retains the U.S. title. Both men stand up. They face each other. Ricochet tries to shake AJ's hand, but he gets attacked. Good Brothers try to make it look like they were breaking it up, but they join in on the fight. So it was 3-on-1. So AJ, the Good Brothers, the club is back in town, turning AJ a full-fledged heel as Raw goes off the air. And you know what? I welcome this change. They don't have, let's face it, Raw does not have a top heel right now. We got Baron Corbin. No, you don't. There is no top heel right now on Raw. Argument can be made about Shane and McIntyre, but the thing is, they jump back and forth with this bullshit wildcard rule. Why isn't, well, he may or may not now, but I don't think it will happen. But why wasn't AJ jumping back and forth, even if the plan was not to make him a heel? Daniel Bryan's been jumping back and forth, but he's not a top heel. Roman Reigns has all been off the past couple of weeks, TV anyway. He was a top face, but he wasn't jumping back and forth. Especially, you can't jump when you're off the air. That's one thing, but he wasn't jumping all the time. Especially the week of the return of the Undertaker, Roman Reigns didn't show up on SmackDown that week. He didn't show up this week at all. So I do welcome this new change, even though we've been there before, but hopefully it'll be done properly this time. Because when AJ was a heel last time, he did have the Good Brothers with them, but eventually they broke apart, I believe, because of that year's draft, which just ruined a lot of things back then. And now, back together under the same banner. I would have loved to have seen a four-man staple with Finn Balor, but that's just me. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that. But who knows? Maybe they'll, since SummerSlam's coming up real soon, maybe they'll have another cameo together just for, a pop. SmackDown begins with a recap of what happened between Strowman and Lashley. It's reported here in kayfabe. Both men have suffered multiple contusions, and Strowman, in Strowman's case, possibly suffered a ruptured spleen. And that Lashley was scheduled to appear on SmackDown, and that was his video that was shown on Titantron about putting Strowman in the morgue the next time he takes an ambulance ride. But enough about that. We have a Kevin Owens shows to get to as guests Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre. Here they are again. Shane is not afraid of The Undertaker, and it's declared that the tag team match at Extreme Rules is now no holds barred. So here's another tease about another turn here, possibly Kevin Owens becoming babyface, especially how he performed all night. But he shows clips of the night before where Shane was running away from The Undertaker, even before The Undertaker got to the ring. Shane insists that he's still not afraid, and for Kevin Owens to continue to reading off the cue cards he gave him earlier. And Owens is great here. He's just, we're not answering that. We're not going to ask that question. He's just going to something he likes, but eventually gets to a cue card that looks like he came up with himself. So Kevin Owens asks Shane how it felt like to lose to The Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania in Texas. This apparently upsets Shane, and it's Drew who gets in Kevin Owens' face. And this brings out Dolph Ziggler for some reason, and we all notice at this point there's no Sami Zayn. So Owens mocks Ziggler about, it should have been him, on and on and on. So instead of saying which one should it be number one contender between Owens and Dolph Ziggler, Shane McMahon forces both Kevin and Dolph to team up to take on Heavy Machinery, because the winner of that match will be included into the SmackDown Tag Team Championship match at Extreme Rules between New Day and Daniel Bryan and Rowan, making it a triple threat. So interesting opening here as the ring was full of heels, but again, what plans do they have for Kevin Owens moving forward? Daniel Bryan and Rowan head to the ring as Bryan will take on Big E one-on-one. But before he gets there, he tells Kayla that his team will enter as the Planet Tag Team Champions and will leave as the Planet Tag Team Champions at Extreme Rules. Bryan will steal a victory here over Big E as Rowan drives Big E into the ring post and throws him back into the ring. Xavier Woods tries to make a save, but he gets caught in midair by Rowan jumping off the ring steps. Back inside the ring, we see Daniel Bryan deliver the running knees for the win, pinning Big E. Backstage, we see R-Truth looking for the 7-Eleven TV European champion Drake Maverick as he wants his baby back. If 7-Eleven, I mean, they worked together before, but if 7-Eleven was a long-term sponsorship or partner with WWE, they got to put the 7-Eleven logo on the side plates of the 24/7 championship. Nikki Cross is given the responsibility and honor of hosting a moment with Bliss as Alexa hands over the privilege and torch for the night in order to interview once again Bayley. So now Bayley, for the second day in a row, I should say. First was Carmella, now it's Bayley asking the question, you beat her last week, but it's Alexa getting the title shot at Extreme Rules. Presumably, this was getting Nikki Cross upset being asked so many times. So she challenges Bayley right there and there, non-title match. The match itself doesn't take too long, as Bayley this time was victorious over Nikki Cross after delivering a Bayley to belly suplex for the win. Samoa Joe and Kofi Kingston go face to face. Kingston points out that Joe is jealous that it was he who got his WrestleMania moment and not Joe at WrestleMania, which makes no sense because Joe won back the United States title, but whatever. Joe then, after mentioning Kofi Kingston's family, and Kingston being a little clever, realizing that, yeah, that's your shtick, Joe. You got to go make things personal and mentioning my family when you know damn well you're not going to do anything, which is true. We never got a payoff between Samoa Joe and Dominic Mysterio. So that probably will never happen now unless they go back to it later on. So Joe tries to offer a handshake in order to keep Kofi and his loved ones safe until Extreme Rules. Kingston at first teases about shaking the hand, but at the same time, we also see the cameraman that was standing behind Joe kind of block our view. And for good reason, because Kingston flips him off. But then they go back to the cameraman again after changing angles, and we see a full screen flip of the bird from Kofi Kingston to Samoa Joe. Later on, it's reported that a lot of countries outside of the United States obviously censored the said middle finger because, one, it wasn't expected, and two, it's not allowed. Or in most cases, it's both. So a little bit of Stone Cold Kofi Kingston here, although he wasn't as aggressive because Kingston, unlike Stone Cold, delivered the flip of the bird with a smile on his face and delivered a Trouble in Paradise, knocking out Joe as Kingston wins the face-to-face, I guess. Apollo Crews one-on-one with Andrade, and surprisingly, no out of 3 falls match on SmackDown, thankfully. Towards the end, Apollo Crews smashes Andrade's head onto the ring apron and throws him back into the ring, only for Zelina to deliver a Hurricanrana, and Apollo crashes into the announce table ringside. Andrade sees this and immediately comes back out, throws Apollo Crews back into the ring, delivers the hammerlock DDT, and gets the win. No Chad Gable taking notes here. Kevin Owens and Dolph Ziggler are discussing strategy over their tag team match later on against Heavy Machinery, and they get into an argument. So after a week of speculation of who it was knocking on the door of Aleister Black, it was no one. As Aleister Black claims that he went to open the door and found no one, started laughing, saying he doesn't care who it was that knocked on his door, but he wants you to show up at Extreme Rules. Back in the ring, Ember Moon now has a chance to avenge her loss against Mandy Rose and is victorious after hitting Rose with the Eclipse. After the match, Sonya Deville checked on Mandy, but no follow-up to their little chemistry from the week before. Very interesting, but the Nintendo Switch is avenged. We have Shelton Benjamin backstage, and he's being asked off camera who's going to win the WWE Championship at Extreme Rules. So it's a headshot of Shelton, and after he gets the question, he literally looks around, and the camera slowly zooms in, and we get a bit of a slow smile. And then the camera just pans to the left, making it look like as if Shelton Benjamin walked off stage, so to speak. But I have no clue what the hell that was about, but thanks for coming, Shelton. So, main event, Dolph Ziggler and Kevin Owens teaming up to take on Heavy Machinery, where the winner will be part of a triple threat match for the SmackDown Tag Team titles at Extreme Rules. So throughout this match, the SmackDown Tag Team Champions are ringside doing commentary, and the New Day, of course, have their own announce table out there. So, sure enough, just like at the ending, it was complete chaos. The Tag Team Champions and the New Day go at it outside. They destroy all the pancakes. Rowan claw slams Xavier Woods through their very own announce table, and referees break up the fight. Everyone gets tossed to the back, but the match inside the ring continues. And we get a little bit more chaotic here. We get a miscue between Owens and Ziggler. Otis ducks a super kick from Ziggler and instead hits Owens. Tucker gets rid of Ziggler, and Heavy Machinery deliver the compactor onto Kevin Owens for the win. and now are included in the triple threat match at Extreme Rules. And for his trouble after the match, Ziggler gets a stunner from Owens as SmackDown goes off the air. So I'll have more details about this in a little while, but Eric Bischoff was reported not to have been at SmackDown this week, which I found very interesting. So a few side notes here. There were no Firefly Funhouse episodes, no cameos of the puppets roaming around backstage. A better use of their time, especially getting rid of the 2 out of 3 fall matches for now and focusing more on the action rather than promos that take way too much time in the ring. And I would assume slowly but surely we will get more talent to get their TV time. Maybe we'll see Rusev real soon again. Shinsuke, no follow-up to that, surprisingly, between the face-off with himself and Finn Balor the week before about the Intercontinental Championship. So a lot of good possibilities here. Again, even without the presence of Bischoff backstage this week on SmackDown does not mean his fingerprints weren't all over this. But a bit of a change. And it's funny because whenever Bischoff was on television during the NWO run, he was always the opening and was always somewhere in the middle of the show cutting a promo with or without the NWO. So, yeah, that took up a lot of time as well. And it didn't matter how many hours it had, 2-3 hour show for Nitro, followed by Thunder. Eventually, Thunder wind down a little bit as far as the overexposure of the NWO. But the first few months after Thunder debuted, it was, full of NWO. And it was just too much. So I guess we all can learn from some mistakes or just not overdoing certain things. And that was that. So just a few more notes here from Raw. According to Wade Keller, as mentioned earlier, Heyman was indeed at the gorilla position next to Vince McMahon the entire night. And that there wasn't a sign of any arguments or anyone being combative about a certain segment. Both men were understanding. There was an understanding between both men, and the show went off without a hitch. So once word got out, another element of curiosity was going to be the ratings. So this past week's edition of Raw drew an average of a 2.4, almost a 2.5 overnight viewing, compared to the weeks before, 2.2 overnight viewing. And I think it was a big improvement. Like I said, from one week to another, it's night and day. So let's just see what happens. I don't want to jinx this. I'm not saying, we're back to where WWE should be. It's not quite there yet. And yes, that extra 200,000 average gain in the ratings or in viewership is something. But I'm pretty sure WWE will be more comfortable and satisfied if they were closer to, say, between a 4 and a 5 overnight. And people ask all the time, you guys used to pull in 4s, 5s, 6. Where did all those people go? And at this time of year, football's not not in season. And you can argue about baseball, but we're nowhere near the playoffs right now. The NHL season finished a few weeks ago. Yeah, we got the FIFA Cup going on. We got the women's soccer championship going on, which is going to conclude this Sunday, matter of fact. Go USA. But even if you did have all that in play, even if you had all that going on at the exact same time, which is possible, but it's a double standard, especially coming from WWE. They don't consider themselves a sport. So why would you compare yourself in your arguments to other sports that go on at the same time when you're asked about, well, your ratings were low this week? Well, you see, football and everything. Yeah, basketball wasn't. Why would you have that argument? Okay, let me ask this. If you're listening and you're obviously a diehard pro wrestling fan, that's why you're listening to me, and thank you. But if you're also a diehard football fan, baseball fan, basketball, and no one says you cannot be a fan of all at the same time. And of course, you have your seasons. You have your time of year to shine and have your games. But when you flip back and forth, when let's say football and baseball are in at the same time, and it's a game of your two favorite local teams, your hometown teams playing at the same time in different parts of the world, you more than likely will flip back and forth. Especially when football gets their halftime. You want to see what your baseball team is doing. And at any point that weekend or the following weekend, would you hear the announcers, not that WWE do, but would you hear about the announcers, that other football game or that baseball game that was going on at the same time as our game tonight is getting more viewership. Why is that? Or would you hear or read somewhere on ESPN or your local newspaper in the sports section, well, this weekend, baseball is expected to have more viewership than the football season. I mean, I may not have worded it the best way possible, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. If the WWE, and seemingly that the only one, they don't compare, officially they do not compare themselves to other sports. But only when it's convenient and when it comes to these PR answers and responses would they go there. And even then, it just doesn't make sense. There are more excuses. And it really showed for the past few weeks leading up until their last pay-per-view. May not have shown much at house shows, but it does. But house shows don't count. They just care about the revenue for the day. But when it comes to TV shows, pay-per-views such as Stomping Grounds, and that week, matter of fact, when you have less than half of the arena full for a pay-per-view, and then the following night, a copy and repeat of the same audience in attendance. Yeah, that was like, holy shit, we got to do something now rather than later. And conveniently, after the fact, were the reports about Heyman and Bischoff coming back. Now, an argument can't be made as far as how long in advance were discussions in play. I believe it was Meltzer saying that, they've been trying to get Heyman for this entire year, and Bischoff was never mentioned during these arguments, these discussions, I should say. But the same week that Stomping Grounds and Raw do poorly in attendance, and I believe SmackDown as well, they pushed the panic button, and they did, just like they did when they brought back The Undertaker out of nowhere, and everything seems to be on the rise for now. Because if you're in WWE, these are just testing grounds for the next couple of weeks to see if there is enough interest that generates the audience to return. And especially word of mouth, if that's strong enough, it'll bring in even a more bigger audience. So it's all waiting game right now. It shouldn't take too long. I believe we'll have a better idea post Extreme Rules leading up to SummerSlam. Because you know how big of a deal they make SummerSlam weekend nowadays with the NXT TakeOver shows, Raw and SmackDown in the same arena as SummerSlam. So we shall see. Because had SummerSlam, not that it would have been as bad, but if SummerSlam could have been a fraction of what Stomping Ground was as far as attendance goes, they're more than likely not going to do those extended weekends for SummerSlam anymore after this year. So we shall see. I'm one to keep an open mind about this. But if it looks and sounds and smells like it, you got to call it for what it is. Why WWE just only depends on these corporate bullshit public relation responses. And we heard them all. We've heard them all. It's almost making us wrestling fans smarter than we really should be, because we hear it coming a mile away. Hell, I'll give you a better one. Whenever you listen to something to wrestle with or something to wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, it's obvious when he starts rambling over his own words, but when it's constantly repeating and he says, then you go out there and run a multi-million-dollar company and you book the way you want to and it's not going to work long-term. No. When you're just constantly repeating yourself that way, you don't have any answers and you just don't want to say what we want to hear. Or in some cases, I'm pretty sure this is the case, You don't want to give out too many secrets, which is fine. But you know what? It is what it is. But at times, the voice of the public, the audience, your very fans can be heard because it's too loud not to ignore. And whether they admit it or not, they have panicked, they being WWE, to pull rabbits out of their hats, sometimes unexpected ones, sometimes going back to what worked before can maybe work now. So far, it's been only 1 week. Give it a month or so, maybe 2. Me personally, I'm waiting till after SummerSlam to see what other angles they're going to come up with. Maybe fresh ones. Maybe they'll continue these. Thankfully, before Heyman even came back, they announced that Corbin is not going to have any more title shots after Extreme Rules. So we'll see. So it's not AJ Styles versus Seth Rollins anymore because he's going to have to go after the U.S. title against Ricochet. And maybe Ricochet's going to have a couple of his buddies team up with him to deal with the Good Brothers. Who knows? All this stuff takes time to plan out and then lay out and deliver. But what I saw so far this week, especially on Raw, is a step in the right direction. So I mentioned earlier about Eric Bischoff not being at Smackdown reportedly. So despite WWE putting out advertisements that it will feature Eric Bischoff, the Wrestling Observer said that wasn't the case. As John Pollock of Post Wrestling said that the former WCW head honcho was not in attendance. Doesn't mean that WWE isn't getting cold feet for hiring him, but unlike Heyman, Bischoff wasn't expected to start as soon as possible. He is currently pinned to begin at Extreme Rules in Philadelphia because as we speak, Bischoff is in the process of actually and physically moving to Connecticut. So obviously that played a huge factor of not, you can't be moving from one state to another and then have said responsibilities put on your lap to run a show this week on SmackDown, leading to a pay-per-view. Heyman was already on the road with WWE. Bischoff he literally got rehired back on a different capacity at a different level other than a talent. And again, it's not expected for Bischoff to appear on TV as a talent, but that could change. So possibly the original writers of SmackDown, or who knows, maybe, this is unconfirmed, maybe Heyman was still an influence on SmackDown as well until Bischoff has or takes part of his new position. Who knows? But maybe that's why Raw was the notable, different, better show of the week. But sooner than later, we're all going to have that influence from Eric Bischoff, and it's going to show. So time will tell. Ronda Rousey recently posted on her YouTube channel, teasing how much she misses being in the WWE. Rousey ends the video by diving off a ladder onto her husband, who is laid across the table and was assisted by Devon Dudley. I thought was hilarious and a nice little nod there. There was another video that I thought was just as funny. And Ronda does have a sense of humor. It's just, she has to have and compose this badass, I guess, outlook of hers where she comes out for a fight and she's already pissed off like somebody stepped on her foot 3 times and never apologized for it. And she's going to go in the ring or in the cage to rip your head off. But outside, and I've seen this and I've heard this from a few people, how much of a sweetheart she can be. And at home, probably even more mellow, for lack of a better term. And she's, I guess her bedroom, she's beating up a Hulk Hogan wrestling buddy. Remember those? She's beating the snot out of it. She has it against the wall, I believe, or one of her pillows that she has in the bedroom. Then you cut away and you see her husband peeking through the door. It's like, what are you doing? And almost immediately cut back to Ronda. She grabs the wrestling buddy, leaps onto her bed that looked like she was jumping across the 50-yard line. And with a big smile on her face, looks at her husband and says, oh, nothing. Nothing. I mean, my words do not do it justice at all. You just got to watch this if you don't follow Ronda Rousey on YouTube. She has said and done a lot of humorous things, and I think she needs more credit for that. Not that she needs to come back whenever she wants to, or whenever the plans are, to be, the next Doink the Clown or something like that. No. There's no need for that. You can include humor in your promos and in your matches once in a while, but for full-fledged comedy shtick like Santino Marella ended up being, no. Can you see Ronda Rousey in that kind of role? And be honest. And if you're answering yes, that's what you prefer to see. And you never took Ronda Rousey seriously, especially in her later career post-UFC. Goldberg posted on Twitter saying, "The only thing I need to accomplish is to erase the feeling I have from my last performance." Of course, he's talking about Parts Unknown and the match he had with The Undertaker. Even here, Goldberg is not using the excuse of being banged up or being concussed or knocked out during the match, which it looked like he was. His head into the ring post, or the bolts that connect the ring post to the turnbuckles, being dropped on his head. Not to mention the noggin he gave himself during his pre-match ritual, banging his head against his dressing room door. So, yeah, I think had he mentioned that, it would have sounded like he was putting out excuses. And that, who knows, had none of those head injuries took place during the match, it could have been a little bit better, could have been even a little longer. But it was reported that Taker was the one that called the audible to go home earlier and ended the match, thus ending the show earlier than expected. Goldberg can still go. It's in him. It's in his system. It's in his blood. It's in his veins. He wants to have maybe not another run, but definitely be a little bit more active in the ring. He has that bug, as they say. He's been bitten by that little itching bug that he wants to get back into the ring and smash people. And Goldberg's always been about that. Smash mouth wrestling, just go in there, beat the hell out of him, and leave just as fast. Can it work now? Well, if you want to go into that argument, because Goldberg is a little older. Better yet, he's a lot older than he was, obviously, from the time he debuted. And you can't expect him to go any longer than, say, 10 minutes. And that's possibly including rest spots. Now, 10 minutes of the match, when I mention time limits like this, I don't talk about the entrances because I think that's a whole separate issue. But when it comes to TV coverage, unfortunately, that's included. But if there's a chance, there's a will, there's a way for Goldberg to make up for it. And if Vince is willing to budge against, who knows, maybe a rematch with The Undertaker. But then this argument there, like, well, then you got to have a rubber match. Someone has to win this trilogy. Time will tell. Paige, remember her? Recently was interviewed by Digital Spy, talking about a lot of pro wrestling topics. And Paige talked about her, well, not her specifically, but the retiring of the Divas Championship and managing the Kabuki Warriors that we haven't seen in a while either. So as far as the Divas title, saying it was an end of an era for me. The dream was always to become Divas champion, and now there's no possible way I could ever become women's champion. And that's the sad part for me, because I can't go into the next era. When it came to managing the Kabuki Warriors of Kairi Sane and Asuka, Paige said, I always wanted to work with Asuka because I always thought she was an amazing athlete and wrestler, and all she needed was to get a little help with mic skills. I'll talk for her. That's great. I can do that. So I love working with those two. They're too sweet. They're so sweet, so professional. I really enjoy my time with them. However, now this is me speaking. However, in a later interview with The Sun, Paige discussed her recent interaction with Vince McMahon and expressed her frustration over herself and the usage of the Kabuki Warriors. So in regards to her interaction with Vince McMahon, she first pointed out saying that she doesn't know the reaction of Vince to the movie Fighting with My Family. But she says, if you go to get a big hug from Vince McMahon, you're doing well. I saw him last week and he gave me a big hug and said, I'm very happy for you. I don't know if it was about the movie or because the fact that I'm healthy. I think he'll probably liked if he watched it, the movie that is. In regards to the Kabuki Warriors not being used, Paige says, if we don't get used, I get really frustrated because we're a good tag team and we need to be utilized. Sometimes the writers have so much on their plate with everyone else and their storylines, they put things on the back burner. I have to remind them, okay, but there is a tag team women's title. I'm like, what the hell, dudes? Let's make something happen. Paige goes on to say, it frustrates me, but once you get to speak to Vince and Hunter about your problems and frustrations, they are always the first to say, let's change this. If you go up to the writers, it's like talking to a brick wall sometimes. Whereas if you go to Vince or to Hunter, they're like, if you have a problem, we can change that for you. So it's kind of night and day. And even if Vince and or Hunter can change anything for you, it's not going to be right away. I'm sure they'll probably bring this up to the creative team. Of course, this interview was right in the middle of the new Heyman and Bischoff era that's taking place now. So we shall see. As a matter of fact, speaking of which, the Iconics, the women's tag team champions, were nowhere to be seen on either show. They could have been on, as far as Raw goes, they could have been on the Smackdown house show, although there were conflicting reports that was canceled and that they could have made it to the house show during Smackdown. But again, nothing was confirmed. But Paige is a funny one. And I find it so ironic that she's showing frustration and loves working with the Kabuki Warriors, which in hindsight I thought was a great idea, but lack of exposure does kind of kill your momentum and possibly your fan base a little bit, although I'm sure everyone's going to be excited by the time Kyrie and Asuka eventually return to television. But this coming from a woman who not that long ago took to Twitter answering a fan's question, blaming the fans for the lack of the women's evolution at the time, moving forward. That it's your fault. You're expecting and wanting bra and panty matches and pillow fights and this and that. No, I honestly don't recall anyone asking for that, other than having women having more time in the ring, longer matches on TV. That's not to excuse that there might be one or two little perverts out there that prefer such a thing to see on their television involving the women. There's a time and place for it, but for now, it's not in WWE. But to just blame the fans in general with those said excuses, I find it ironic now that she's now on the back burner, as she put it, when it comes to the writers, and that she's not able to compete for any of the women's titles right now because of her health issues or her neck and back problems. Very young, too. It sucks. It really does. I really felt for her for something that important from a young age, which is, let's face it, most of us, including yours truly, to get that opportunity like that and only to be taken away. No one's fault, no one to blame here. You know, shit does happen. Sometimes you can do the same spot every night for several weeks, but it takes that one time to be taking it the wrong way because you were off by an inch, or maybe your opponent was off or too soon or too early or whatever the case was, and you have an injury. It really sucks. But it'll be a little, let me be honest, my show. It'll be very hypocritical for Paige to say what she said about going to Vince and to Hunter to make things change for her and the Kabuki Warriors. Fine, she's looking out for others, not for herself in this case. But to do and say all this now after blaming the fans for the lack of the woman's push in recent memory. Yeah, she's never addressed it, probably never will. You know, if you've seen and read how she responds to some of the fans when she's pissed off, imagine when she's trying to be put in her place for something that she mentioned that's being used against her. Who knows? But it wouldn't surprise me if she already learned the tricks of the trade when it comes to giving PR responses. But that's just me. A few days ago, Seth Rollins and Will Ospreay got into a bit of a Twitter war of sorts when it came to Rollins saying that the WWE is the best company to hold professional wrestling, or the WWE has the best professional wrestling in the world, this and that. Yeah, I mean, it does have wrestling. As far as the best, well, not everyone is allowed to shine. Ask Kenta. To be asked to wrestle the way he has and wanted to before he became Hideo Itami. So this caught the eye of Will Ospreay. You know, there are other companies out there besides WWE pour their hearts and soul out to all of their matches they ever have. And then for some reason, Rollins decided to take that argument to a completely different angle and wanted to compare bank accounts. At that moment, anyone that does such a thing when you're doing the exact same thing for a living, but because you work for different companies, yes, one company is bigger than the other financially, doesn't mean that you don't go out there busting your ass the same way as the next person does that works for a smaller company and may not get paid as much as you do. But if it's all about the money for you and you bring up the sizes and the difference of your bank account regardless, you, my friend, lose that argument right there and there. It's a dick move. It's a cop-out move. We're like, well, my bank account is bigger than yours. I have a mansion. What do you have, a trailer park? Yeah, once you go there, and that's not even close to making it personal, but you get bitter because you have no foot to stand on the argument you started. And now that you're being confronted by someone else that more than likely could have had the same opportunities or was there in the same positions you are now, for reasons did not work out for them, who the hell are you to say otherwise and say, well, look at my bank account, it's bigger than yours, shut the hell up. On the flip side of things, Rollins took to social media and apologized to Will Ospreay for bringing up said bank account argument into the situation after the argument about the best wrestling in the world only being in WWE. Among other things, Rollins released the following apology for his back and forth with Will Ospreay on Twitter, saying, after a few days to sit on it, that could be taken two different ways, I'd like to apologize to @Will Ospreay for the tweet I sent his way about comparing bank accounts. It was dumb of me and not in the line of my values. The moment I pressed the send button, I knew it was trash. But I'm too stubborn for my own good. I stand firm in my sentiments that WWE is the best pro wrestling on the planet and that I'm the best of the best doing it right now. After a hell of a week of travel, our crew didn't waver for a second. Top-level humans busting their asses for the love of the game. I couldn't be more proud to be a champion with this company and represent WWE and the entire industry in the way it deserves. No more garbage tweets. I can and will be better. So at the very least, despite all that trash talk back and forth, and whether he realized it or someone else pointed out to him, like, yeah, dude, that was a dick move. Seth Rollins was the bigger man here as far as acknowledging what he said and what he did and apologized for it. And for the record, yes, Will Ospreay did accept Seth Rollins' apology. And we all can move forward from this, but it may not be a big deal. I mean, it's nowhere near arguments where, you know, the screw job, was it a work or not? What did and Fabulous Moolah did not do with her trainees and whatnot. what really happened with Randy Savage and Stephanie and all this nonsense. There's always, when it comes to arguments like that, it's always going to be one-sided. Here, especially in today's age, where you have social media, we have ways to communicate with the world at any time. You will see both sides of the arguments, and like many of us, we're looking at one, that being Seth Rollins, and yeah, you screwed up. That's it. You lost this argument, but at least he was able to come back and apologize for it. And I applaud Rollins for doing such a thing. Did he have to? No. Was he forced by WWE and say, hey, we saw what happened, you might want to go out there? I want to be under the impression for now, until proven otherwise, that this was all Seth Rollins, his choosing to do so, to apologize. And I believe it's still up there. Sometimes when such exchanges back and forth between a WWE talent and a non-WWE talent go back and forth like this, and it gets uglier, someone in the higher office that either runs or is in charge of maintaining social media traffic and what's being said or not on the WWE side, they'll tell you to take it down. Just like they told CM Punk to take down that tweet about him shitting his drawers on an episode of Smackdown that we never got to see, by the way. But yes, it was the bigger thing to do for Seth Rollins. I applaud him for it. I do have more respect for him now than before. And we can all move on for this chapter of their lives. And if you're a fan who took this to the heart, hopefully all of this is brought to an end by Rollins apologizing, and we can all move on now. AJ Lee, she's all over the place as far as social media goes, on book tours and making public appearances to make speeches. She is a busy woman. Even took time to talk to Fox Sports 1 and their talk show, Fair Game. She was asked about if she would ever lace up the boots once again, and I'm sure she gets this all the time. But here, a little bit more detailed than before, I believe. She's been retired since 2015, so not that long retired, but has still kept in great shape. Having her last match on Raw after WrestleMania 31. But a return could be possible, saying, I'd say never. Every time I've said never in my life, I would wind up doing the thing. I never date a wrestler. I never date another wrestler. Then at the end, she ended up marrying one. She ends by saying, I don't know what the future holds, so not to hold your breath, but never say never. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean anything. Again, she's been real busy with her book tour and making a lot of appearances, making a lot of speeches, public speeches, so on and so forth. Doing a lot of positive things post-retirement from pro wrestling, of course. You just mentioned CM Punk, and a lot of us know more or less what's happening, putting aside the ongoing back and forth lawsuits between himself and Colt Cabana, which I read and I get into. And never say never. We've seen examples of that throughout wrestling history. Would it work now? I mean, let's all be honest here. AJ Lee returning, let's say, either Survivor Series or Royal Rumble coming up, leading for a big match at next year's WrestleMania in Tampa. Whomever she would face will be a big deal. But I think the biggest thing to come out of all of it will be her reaction when she steps on stage, whether her music hits or not. She walks out, everybody turns heads. It's AJ Lee, and the pop that she will get. You talk about the Road Warrior pop. Yeah, she'll get her very own Road Warrior pop whenever she decides to come back at whatever capacity. They might push her to AJ to be a heel, but I think it wouldn't work. It'll be like a Becky Lynch situation all over again from a couple of years ago. You try to make Becky a heel, being bitter, not winning the title after including Charlotte Flair into her match at SummerSlam. and then you turn on your best friend only for the crowd to turn against the idea. Like, no, she can't be a heel. This is awesome. I would have done the exact same thing. And everyone saw the whole Charlotte Flair nonsense all the way to WrestleMania. That you've been there, you've done that. It's okay. So now that you've got that out of your system, Ronda's out of the company for now. Becky Lynch is still a women's champion. Where's Charlotte Flair and all this post WrestleMania? So kind of makes you wonder, then what the hell was the big deal? Just to claim and say and brag that, yeah, she was one of the women part of the first ever WrestleMania main events for women? Of course, this all leads to, like I've been saying pretty much throughout this whole show, we move on. We just move on. But to finish up what I want to say about AJ Lee, yeah, who doesn't want to see her back in the ring? She's extremely young to not make a return, at least for one more run. Give it a couple of years, if possible, if she can fit it in. Whatever plans she may or may not have with CM Punk as far as having a family goes. I mean, it would make no sense for AJ Lee to sign up tomorrow and she re-debuts on Raw next week. And then a couple of weeks later, oh, I'm pregnant. Even though after signing a 2-year deal, so then we're not going to see you at all much. You'll be out for your 9 months and then maybe an extra 3 months because you got to be mom. And may or may not bring the child along with you while traveling, which probably is not advised to do so. But it's a little different nowadays. Look back at the story with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, WrestleMania 4. Supposedly there were plans to make him the Intercontinental Champion again. And instead, he lost it. He dropped it to the Honky Tonk Man because he needed to he wanted to spend more time at home with his newborn son. Granted, it's a different story because it wasn't Steamboat. It wasn't Ricky the one that gave birth to his son, but you get the logic here. You just became a parent for the first time and you want to spend time with your new baby, but you can't do that because of the high demand that WWE, especially back then, needed from you. And you had to be on the road. You had to stick to your commitments. You got to always make it to towns, make those appearances, and copy and repeat the next week. Back then, you're lucky if you had 1 day a week off to go home. Nowadays, you have 2, maybe 3, depending on which show you're on, including weekends if it's close to home. Just yesterday, how many of the WWE talents, I don't know if you follow them much on social media, Drake Maverick and EC3 had barbecues at EC3's apartment place. You saw Otis in the background. Later on, I saw that Carl Anderson and his hot Asian wife with a few other friends were at St. Petersburg Beach, Florida, just chilling. So yeah, obviously everyone had the day off because it was a holiday. But if the holiday doesn't land in the middle of the week, and you're working for WWE, you're not going home, chances are. So things are different now, schedule-wise. And if the deal could be reached today for AJ Lee and still continue on her book tour, let's say, or any other commitment she might have when it comes to public appearances, it would have to be between each week. And maybe if they want to stick to the draft or the brand split, then she can only appear maybe on one of the shows, more likely probably Raw. Or if you really want to spice things up, by the time SmackDown gets to Fox and the numbers aren't doing too well, let AJ Lee debut on SmackDown and post some numbers in that direction. Time will tell. And speaking of Carl Anderson, it is believed that he and partner Luke Gallows, tag team partner, have agreed to a new term with the WWE. However, according to PW Insider, they have yet to sign. It is first start after their current deal, which expires sometime this fall. All signs are still looking for the tag team to leave WWE entirely. They've turned down a 5-year deal not too long ago. And those close to both Anderson and Gallows pointing to issues with creative as part of their decision. And now that they're on a top heel faction alongside AJ Styles, presumably, maybe, all of that has changed. But right now, PW Insider Dave Meltzer and others cannot confirm this, but they're going on the impression, because what we saw this past Monday night, that maybe a deal has been reached, maybe not, or at least agreed upon, but nothing has been signed yet. Cain Velasquez, former MMA and UFC World Heavyweight Champion, will be making his pro wrestling debut with AAA's Triple Mania 27 on August 3rd. Cain Velasquez is scheduled to team up with Cody Rhodes and Psycho Clown to take on Texano Jr., Taurus, and a mystery partner. For those who don't know or remember, Cain Velasquez, in all places, has trained at the WWE Performance Center. He has then jumped to other performance schools and pro wrestling schools since then. Apparently never reached a deal, if there was ever one on the table, but never reached a deal with WWE. But still had that itch, there's that bug again, to want to perform in a ring in a professional wrestling capacity. And I think that this is a good move. There's no sense. We all know who Cain Velasquez is. We all know what he can do. He could have been treated like, say, Ronda Rousey when she joined up with WWE, the same way that Brock Lesnar, when he returned from UFC to the WWE. But it's a whole different horse, because at least with Lesnar, he had that experience already being in the wrestling ring. Ronda Rousey, she's a natural athlete all around, and so is Velasquez. But I think putting in a spotlight that soon, that fast, because of name recognition in the WWE, I think he'll be lost right away. What they could have done is something similar to what they did with Ken Shamrock. Even Shamrock believed he should not have been put in the top spot right away. Let him earn it like everyone else did. And Cain could have gone that direction as well, but the way things have been going up until now, even with the changes of Paul Heyman and Bischoff, could have been a little different. But at the time, I don't think it would have worked out, my opinion. But it'll be interesting to see. And I'll see, I think this will be on pay-per-view as well. I got to double check this for Triple Mania. And I'll be curious to check out Cain Velasquez and his performance in the ring. And whatever lack of skills he's missing, being in a 6-man tag team match will disguise that real well, and have limited time in the ring to get the feel for it, to get to know how it's like to perform in front of a large audience, because every time there's Triple Manias, they do perform really well when it comes to attendance. So good luck to Cain Velasquez. Unfortunately, I would have to end the show with some sadness. And it's just another time where the pro wrestling world mourns not one but two losses this week. Don Pedro Perro Aguayo has passed away at the age of 73. World-renowned, famous Mexican wrestler, active in the 70s all the way to the early 2000s. Inducted into AAA's Hall of Fame. Competed in Japan's UWF, which at the time was associated with the World Wrestling Federation, and also becoming at this time the first and only WWF Intercontinental Tag Team Champions alongside Gran Amada. He also held the WWF Light Heavyweight title numerous times, but this was when it was separate from the Light Heavyweight title that we ended up seeing during the Monday Night Wars, the Attitude Era, that Taka Michinoku would win. That was a different title under the same name, but the one that Don Pedro had in Japan was unrecognized by the World Wrestling Federation. But it's on record. No matter how much they deny it, it's on record. Maybe now they will include this in the alumni portion of their website. I don't think it's ever been there, other than its, I guess, second attempt or the unofficial debut of the second version of the WWF Light Heavyweight title, won by Taka Michinoku, as mentioned before. He was the man who defeated and unmasked Conan before he made his run in WCW. His last match on record was a tag team bout, defeating the tag team roughly translated into Universal 2000 and his partner Mask of 2000 back in 2007 in Tijuana, Mexico. Now, if his name sounds familiar, that's because he is the senior to Pedro Aguayo Jr., who passed away not too long ago in 2015. The father and son were known as a known tag team of Los Perros del Mal, the Bad Dogs. Pedro Jr. unfortunately passed away in the ring at the age of 35 following an accident that caused a severe whiplash, breaking 3 vertebrae in his neck. His father withdrew from public life ever since his son's passing. And other than what was posted officially on his Facebook page, no word of cause of death as far as Pedro Sr. The other sad news to report is the passing of Jacques Rougeau Sr. back on July 1st at the age of 89 after battling pulmonary fibrosis, which is scarring in the lungs that, generally speaking, can be caused by anything, even reactions to medicine, or just come out of nowhere. It's one of those types of diseases and illnesses. Rougeau Sr. debuted in professional wrestling all the way back in 1955, but would retire less than a year later since word, as according to his family, wasn't paying enough. He would attempt a second comeback or another run with his brother Johnny after opening up a wrestling office in Montreal, All Star Wrestling, and he will go on to wrestle for another decade. He also have stations in Quebec, also wrestled for the NWF out of Buffalo, New York, and will have a run with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Rougeau Sr. was in Quebec at the time of his passing, where he resided since his retirement. He is survived by his wife, 5 children, and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So my thoughts and prayers go out and are with the Rougeau family and the Aguayo family during this tough time. It's unfortunate. I know no words can ease the pain that they're going through. Some can say, well, it's part of life. You know what happens. Well, it's not easy to use that excuse in explaining how everything is going to be okay after the fact to those who are severely saddened by this loss, especially if it was not expected to come anytime soon. People dread it. People try their best to prolong said individual's life for as long as possible, but then after a while, if they're in a position that they can choose for themselves what they want to do versus what you rather want to do for them, it does become argumentative, sometimes even at a selfish level. But doesn't change the fact that they lost loved ones, and all they can do now is remember the good times. And with that, I close with a 10-bell salute to those lost this week from the pro wrestling world. Not everyone may not know or recognize their names, but if you take the time to look up even a bit of their history, of their career, that they put in and gave to the career and life of pro wrestling, you would appreciate them a little bit more so. Their sons and daughters that continue on the name and their legacy and in the tradition of professional wrestling. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of the July 4th festivities and weekend. Till next time, everyone, behave, be good.